Hello everyone, this is Dr. Taruna Bansal, Associate Professor in the Department of Geography, Jamia Millia Islamia, and today I would be talking on classification of natural tourism resources on various bases. Now, before we start with the classification, we need to know what is natural tourism resources. Natural tourism resources consist of all natural elements and factors that possess a high degree of attractiveness and that reflect their geographical environment and can be valorized for tourism purposes. Now, according to these features, they can be classified into a number of types, but before we proceed to the classification, we need to understand what is natural tourism. So, nature or natural tourism means experiencing natural places typically through outdoor activities that are sustainable in terms of their impact on the environment, and there are certain major principles which are there when we deal with nature tourism, which involves travel to natural destinations, minimizes the impact of human activity on the environment, builds environmental awareness, provides direct financial benefits for conservation, provides financial benefits and empowerment of local people, respects local culture and supports human rights. Now, what are the different types of natural resources? So, on the basis of the characteristics, on the basis of what they are, they can be actually divided into 4 types. Number 1 is geomorphological, second is climate based, third is hydrographical and biogeographical, and fourth is protected natural heritage. Geomorphological resources, these consist of all phenomena and processes associated to the genesis, prevalence and contemporary dynamics of relief. As an independent natural factor, relief has a complex role because a precondition the forms in which all other natural given conditions occur in a particular area and the manner of their impact in influence of qualitative characteristics of the surface and near surface part of the rocks complex, as well as the features of climate, soil, vegetation, drainage coefficient. So, the first type in the geomorphological process, resources is heights above the sea level. Various relief forms represent a complex tourist attraction. Heights are a natural component of space that can be artificially changed or created only in exceptional cases and at huge cost. Although valorization is rarely based on a single natural element, it should be noted that plains are a spatial feature of monotonous tourism, while mountains are a feature of variable tourism. So, as you can see in these slides, mountain passes. These passes, which are at quite a huge height, are one of the natural tourism resources because they are natural. Second is mountains. Mountains are basically relief elevations higher than 500 meters above sea level and are a spatially dominating resource. In recent times, winter mountain tourism has developed rapidly, previously which was also known as health tourism and other branches of tourism to a lesser extent. Mountaineering, climbing, paragliding, ecotourism are some of the types of tourism which are very prevalent in mountains. In evaluating a mountain for tourism purposes, we have to understand the terrain configuration, whereas the quality of an area intended for winter tourism, winter sports tourism is valued using this particularly what is known as the relief energy method. So, what I am trying to say is here that when we talk of winter sports tourism, especially with regard to mountains, we also see the energy that particular mountain has. The method consists of determining the degree of de-leveling of a given surface, that is the difference in altitude between the highest and the lowest usable points. So, if you see some documentaries or something, you will see that even when people are skiing, like especially for the skiing purpose, there are certain parts which are exposed for these particular activities, the entire mountain is not used. So, what we are doing, the energy factor is taken into consideration. Similarly, the more exposed a mountain position is to the maritime influence, the lower the reliability of the snow cover. Why? The moisture will be more. So, if the moisture is more, the snow cover may get diluted. So, as a result, these factors in the mountain are very important when we relate them with the tourist activities, especially skiing, which is very prevalent especially in Alps. Alps being the young mountains, but they are of not such a height as Himalayas are. Moreover, Himalayas are in tropical climate, but Alps are in the temperate zone. The duration of snow cover is prolonged with the increase of continental influences. Mountain ranges are more susceptible to changes in weather than mountain systems. On cone-shaped massifs, snow is more likely to melt diffraction of maritime air. The snow cover lasts longest on the northern exposures of the mountain systems. On northern exposures, the snow may last for more than around 3 to 4 weeks longer than the southern exposures. Because of the frequency of the wind, snowstorms and sudden changes in weather, there are also these factors also have an impact on how these mountains are being used or looked upon as points of tourist activities. Coasts are also very important spatial element of maritime regions because they account for the major part of tourism activities. Advantages are coasts of moderate relief energy that enable vertical user differentiation and provide better visits. Coastlines with beaches are of particular importance to tourism. Beaches can be classified as sandy beaches, pebble beaches, stone slab beaches and beaches covered in grass. Sandy beaches located in lagoons are especially valued. In some beaches, however, the value of the coast as a resource is declining because of the sand disappearing, and this is nothing but the direct consequence of urban development of the coast. The construction of ports, the concreting of coastline regions for tourism purposes and other usages that result in devastation. Anthropogenic activities have caused changes to the natural appearance of some coasts, which have been covered in gravel and concrete or on which various solid facilities have been erected that are not congruent with the landscape. Pollution, largely as a result of waste disposal, is universally present. So, when we come to India, we have a huge coastline. We have Konkan coast, we have Malabar coast, as you can see in the slide. We have Coromandel coast, and we also have mouth of Ganga. So, when you see these pictures, you see we have a coast where we have when we see the Western Ghats especially, we have a small mountain, and at one on you are seeing sea as well as mountain. Especially this is also there when you see most of the shootings of movies which are done in America. So, at one side you have a huge mountain, on the other side we have the ocean. So, it has its own scenic beauty. We have the Malabar coast where we have the backwaters. So, you have these lined up palm trees which has its own different type of beauty. If you see the picture there, that is the Marina beach in Chennai. So, a beautiful sandy beach, and then you have the mangroves in the Sundarban. So, this means that coasts have been very different and an important natural resources for tourism activities. Here they are different photographs of beaches. Next, what we come to is islands. Islands represent a fundamental resource for maritime tourism, especially when we are talking of natural resource tourism. The attraction power of islands is mostly determined by their numbers. So if you have huge archipelagos, the number becomes the significance becomes more important, while some islands are geomorphological resources in their own right. In terms of morphostructure, a term used in geomorphology in classifying island relief, a distinction can be made into islands, islets, cracks and reefs. So, islands have a coastal circumference larger than 10 kilometers, while islets has a coastal circumference between 1.5 to 10 kilometers, while cracks are rocky elevations above the water and have no soil or vegetation except occasionally, and cracks can be narrow, tall, pointed like monoliths, but they can also be of the shape of an islet. Then unlike cracks, reefs can be of either above or below water during high tide. They are steep and often solitary rocks with a pointed ridge and without soil. The circumference of reef is usually less than 1 kilometer. as they may present a hazard to navigation, they are delineated in nautical maps. The commonest difficulty that plagues island around the world is demographic recession, economic underdevelopment, impaired bioecological equilibrium and bombastic tourism development. So, somewhere despite their noted weaknesses, islands have been environmentally highly valued and preserved areas, and with high regard to the attractiveness, it attracts huge number of tourists, and as they represent the strategic potential of tourism trade. In addition to natural wealth, the basic resources of inhabited islands are also old villages and immovables, while those of uninhabited islands like include authentic pastures and active farming. The role of the seabed is also very important when we are trying to understand island as a geomorphological resource for natural tourism. The seabed is linked to the underwater activities of tourism. Divers prefer shallow seabeds that provide a great number of attractions on the floor of the sea, and the transparency of the seawater is also another factor for moving along the seabed and viewing its natural and anthropogenic inventory. In terms of tourism, the usability of underwater slopes and floors ranges from very favorable to the rock mass or stony floor, which is highly unfavorable. The deepest seabeds are located in places in which sea currents have a very strong erosive effect. Submarine slopes much suited for underwater tourist activities are those that do not retain sediments or are covered in a thin layer of sediment. The firmness of submarine slopes depends on certain local conditions, and sometimes they are incoherent and free flowing, similar to rock creeps on the land. Now, the geographical phenomena before leading to what can be as a natural resource, we need to understand what I have shown through my slide here, that in India, as I have been saying, we have two groups of islands. One is Lakshadweep, which are 36 coral islands, and only 10 are inhabited and 6 have been open for tourism. They are like, the total land area is only 32 square kilometers, and they are formed of coral deposits and are called atolls. So, what is this? These are the coral reef islands, and people do visit Lakshadweep for that particular feature of its. While when we talk of Andaman Nicobar Islands, they are a group of islands which has India's only active volcano, the Barron Island. So, somewhere what is happening is we are relating, we want to experience this particular features, the distinctive features, geomorphological features of this island, and this is what attracts tourists all over the world to these islands. Next is the geomorphological phenomena. They represent an important natural potential of the lowland regions. These phenomena are caused by relatively vigorous tectonic activities and fault lines, along with numerous thermomineral springs have formed. Now, here examples can be given of hot springs, where there are a number of hot springs which have certain thermomineral waters and have a curative effect and are used in therapeutic purposes or are bottled and sold. Second is when we talk of this geomorphological phenomena, we have the karst, which represents a set of relief that form occurring in rock subject to chemical erosion. Now, if you are visiting Dehradun, we have this Robbers Cave, or if you are visiting northeast, we have this Bora Cave, which have a very distinct geographical geomorphological representation of a karst topography. Now, karst can be found in southern Europe, northern India, Latin America, Carpathians, and in China. Now, karst forms can be classified as superficial and underground forms, and they do attract tourists from all over the world. Next is the climate resources. Now, the climate can be an enabling as well as a constraining factor in tourism development in certain regions. The bioclimate affects the stay of tourists in a given area, while the elements characteristic of individual type of climate impact on the development of selective forms of tourism. Obviously, some form of tourism are less dependent upon the climate because they can take place indoor with air conditioning, but still when we have something in mind that okay, it's summers, where should I visit? So, I have shown here certain pictures of very typical and very famous destinations which people visit in India during the summers. So, we have Sikkim, we have Srinagar, we have Ladakh, we have Shimla, and even we have the northeast, especially Cherrapunji and all, where we can see these waterfalls. So, when we have these summer, so what I am trying to say is that the weather situations like temperature, wind, air humidity, sun rays, they affect our feeling of comfort, and as a result, when we are actually seeing climate, the bioclimatic features are particularly linked to the development of this type of tourism, and especially when we talk of health tourism, and because they impact on the selection of destinations, as tourists tend to choose regions that suit them in the best in terms of bioclimate. The types of climate depend on meteorological elements, like we have these Mediterranean climate, we have this mountain climate. Now, the Mediterranean and mountain climate are very important for Europe's tourism industry. In the Mediterranean region, the climate generally relates to seaside tourism. Temperatures are there, lesser, like not very harsh. So, people are relating it to it. How much time tourists will spend outdoors depend upon insolation. Insolation means incoming solar radiation and precipitation, and in some circumstances also on the winds. Earlier, tourist offerings tended to avoid windy locations. People did not want to go to places which are very windy, but now the somewhere, as people are getting aware, and you also know the local weather conditions, such as water areas facing mountains. So, when we know the local conditions, local weather conditions, and our phones are like actually we have these weather conditions available to us, we are not so much like concerned with winds especially. Now, in today's tourism, what is happening is other locations are sought for, because winds are not, as I said, are not, but when we are going for certain water sport, then you naturally would like to go for a place which is not windy. So, in particular, it is beneficial where people are trying to have a balance between their mental, physical health as well as the recreation. Now, during the tourist season, you will see that local air circulations is an especially important factor when we talk of bioclimate, and it is caused by the uneven heating of land and sea. Now, because of this influence of the local climate, which is basically like, for example, the winds on the coast, the heat in summer, which is not very like permanent feature, there can be certain impact on the places we want to visit. For example, storm winds, they play a negative role, as they restrict their traffic, they may cause damage. Now, difficulties, if there are difficulties in traffic, and especially bridges that have high arcs, people would not like to go there. Similarly, when we are talking of mountain climate, it is largely led to the development of winter sports tourism, because we have low temperatures, you have longer periods of insolation and snowfall. That means there is a certain ambience, certain what should I say, geomorphological feature where you can do skiing. So, if there are strong winds, you will not be able to enjoy. Now, destinations which have long like insolation periods, few cloudy days, are suitable for winter tourism. Like you can see here, I have given certain photographs. Now, during the winter time, great exposure to the sun is possible only at high altitudes or on the coast. Justifiably, sites on which the snow cover is more than around 90 days, people would like to go there, because then you can actually enjoy. The preferred type of snow is of granular. Why? Because if it is granular, the possibility of skiing is more. Elevated temperatures, snow becomes sticky, and because of humidity, this snow is not particularly wide, and people do not want to go into it, and it is also risky. Now, of all the natural tourism resources, climate is the one which is the most dynamic and changes the most. Global warming and ultraviolet radiation have a particular impact on tourism. Warming of the atmosphere at the global level is followed by changes such as rising level of water seas, world seas, the farming of crops that earlier could not be grown on higher altitudes as well as latitudes, warming of the seas, that is shift of the sea side tourism line, and these all are factors which are affecting. Now, the intensity of sun rays is also linked to harmful ultraviolet radiation. The breaking of the protective ozone layer has caused somewhere where we have this ultraviolet radiation. Now, this phenomena, although was discovered in 1985 and has been there since, it has a direct impact on seaside tourism. Now, excessive radiation impairs our immune system. causes inflammation and damage as well as several diseases. As a result, people will not like to go to these places which are more vulnerable to radiation, which is basically harmful between noon and 2 p.m. So, what I am trying to say is that when one is visiting any place, the climate becomes one of the most important factor, and tourism industry has adapted to these climate changes. So, when you are going, when you are visiting some place in summer, you keep all these bioclimate features in mind, and when you are visiting some place in winter, so you would also have these in mind. So, what I am trying to say that climate resources, climate becomes a very essential element when we are classifying these particular natural tourism resources. The third is the hydrographic resources. Now, the hydrographic resources basically for tourism development, it is of prime importance because we have to have water supply to tourism and take into consideration the tactical sensory bathing properties of seawater and the visual contact of tourism with various forms in which water occurs. Now, the tourist is an industry, the tourism as a whole as an industry is a large consumer of fresh water used for different needs. The daily consumption of drinking water per tourist varies from 101 to 158 liters. Now, consumption patterns have shown that the greatest quantities are used for showering or taking a bath, while less is used for washing or cleaning and other purposes. Now, the consumption of fresh water has also increased even when you are talking of winter mountain tourism. Why? Because fresh water is being used to make artificial snow. Now, fresh water has become a constraining factor for number of places where winter tourism does occur, because there is not enough of it which can be utilized for making snow. In most of the destinations, the consumption of bottled water is growing rapidly, and it is gradually taking over the role of leading beverage and becoming a vital commodity on the tourism market. And as a result, again as I said, it has become an important resource. Another, when we talk of hydro in relation to hydrographic resource, is the seawater. Now, it is a great attraction in terms of tourism. Temperature, salinity and transparency are the physical and chemical properties of seawater that determine its value as a tourism resource. Also important is the movement of seawater, that is the sea waves and tides that also impact on guest behavior. All these properties can be valorized providing the seawater is clean. Now, salinity is basically because it is used as a therapeutic property of seawater. So, if you are actually diving in the sea, would like to feel that sand on it. So, the movement of seawater is a less attractive property, because if the water is gushing around or the tides are very high, or the waves are really high waves, you would not like to go there. Now, water that rises with the tide also gains ground, and it also breaches zones and also sometimes lead to floods. So, the phenomena is especially more common when we have this low coast, and so there is the way the water, the way the waves are also moving or the tides are there, they have impact on tourism activity. Now, waves have a great impact on the guest behavior than the tide. Waves are lowest in bays, and they have a short fetch. If a fetch length is very long, it can create waves of destructive power, and this have happened when you have storm surges. We have waves with very long fetch length, and they become very dangerous for boaters. So, these waves have a steep profile, and and their crests are often broken. Now, so as a result, the sea, there is this lack of oxygen, which is called sea spray, which is very difficult if you are doing any water activity in the ocean. So, another important thing which we relate to when we talk of sea is the sea current. Now, they are generally strong and present a hazard to swimmers, especially if they are swimming in channels. Currents that circulate in bays are beneficial as in terms of ecology, as they assist in the natural filtration of seawater. If the waters are used for activities that require the use of technical equipment like rowing, rafting, fishing, canoeing, additional criteria include a vertical profile of the riverbed, because if it has a very shallow riverbed, then naturally you cannot canoe. So, if it is deep, then the people will actually participate in such activities. The fourth resources, when we talk of these natural tourism resources, are the biogeographical resources. Now, the tourism economy is strategically focused on the natural cycles of healthy, food production by restoring specific types of production. Now, as you can see the visuals I have provided here, Kashmir is known as the land of green meadows. So, when you are suppose you are visiting Kashmir, naturally you would like to go and visit an apple orchard, or if you are lucky enough you would like to visit the tulip garden, or even if you have these you get an opportunity of seeing how saffron is cultivated, you would like to go. As you can see strawberry picking in Mahabaleshwar. So, Mahabaleshwar was a spot with its natural beauty, because it is like a hill in the Western Ghat, but the biogeographical importance that the strawberry is being grown there has provided it an added resource, and people are actually visiting Mahabaleshwar for seeing how strawberry is being cultivated in our country. So, these particular places provide important resource or significant resources for tourist activities. Then we also have these when we are trying to protect biologically vulnerable zones and communities, especially forest and meadow communities that have a preventive function, the sea coast and the highland regions. The multi-meaningful relationship of humans toward nature is the basis for developing these biogeographical environment in a tourist region. This relationship has sometimes given such attributes that have made plants or animals a part of that region's identity. As I said, tulip garden. Now, in the valorization of an area for tourism purposes, the value of flora has been shown to be much greater than it is generally thought of. Primarily, flora has a physiological function as it transforms carbon dioxide into oxygen through photosynthesis, but the aesthetic and curiosity values that are related to the diversity of floral species and shapes and its health related value to the evaporation of aromatic oils and other components, they have become an important tourist resources. Now, tourist regions seek to enrich unvaried vegetation that is poor in plant species by creating parks with various types of plants. You can see in these visuals of mine where I have shown these tulip garden, I have shown how we have valley of flowers, then we have these apple orchards, we have these tea gardens, how they have become part of region's landscape and they are important, and especially when you see this park architecture. So, basically this tulip garden, this is not natural of Kashmir, but it has been architectured in such a way that it will attract tourists. Now, similarly to flora, fauna can also be classified as domesticated animals and all other animals living freely in nature. It also offers it can be camel, it can be cattle, foal, house pets, but as well as indigenous breeds. The classification according to zoological principles is applied to animals having which is living freely in nature. They are classified as mammals, birds, fish and other inhabitants, and then we have domestic animals which are vital part of the tourist attraction based on developing rural tourism, and wild animals which are usually used for hunting and fishing as well as photo hunting, that is gaining in popularity. So, you have these huge these safaris in Africa, or if you are going to Kaziranga, so you would like to have a rhino ride. So, somewhere we have what we have done is we have taken out these particular fauna and we have made them tourist attractions and have named them as protected parks or nature parks. Apart from that, we have this protected natural heritage. Now, here what we have done is, according to the world, around the world, the natural diversity has been given lot of attention to ensure that these complexes of animate and inanimate nature are protected from saturation. The essence of protection is to ensure that nature maintains its original appearance. Initially, protection was provided to assets of exceptional and rare value, whereas today efforts are being made so that it becomes a general thing. In these circumstances, tourism has become an active user of these protected areas and in turn a vital factor to a protected ecosystem sustainability. Worldwide, the use of protected areas for tourism purposes is not uniform, and you have within each country we have different laws which govern these protected areas. Now, the general situation however does not apply somewhere when we talk of This because certain areas have been proclaimed as world natural heritage. As you can see, in India also we have these protected natural heritage, like we have Sundarbans, we have Valley of Flowers, or we have the Western Ghats. So what is saying that when we talk especially with respect to India, we see that the these natural tourism, the protected areas, we have these mountain passes, we have these natural tourist resources as the mountain ranges, we have deserts, we have islands, we have natural parks, we have wildlife sanctuaries, to name a few. But what I am trying to say from here is, in this entire discussion here, that on the basis nature is varied, the environment which we have been provided has been varied, and each element of this particular environment which we are also part has been used to attract tourist activity or to provide recreation or leisure to the human community, so that they can relate to the natural environment, they can retune themselves to the nature, because we have to understand here one thing, that we are part of the environment. The human community is not somewhere different from the environment, we are part of the environment. And so when we are studying these natural tourism resources, we are trying to see which are the natural elements, which are the natural features which have gained significant part, or which are significant while attracting tourist activities anywhere in the world, with specific specificity to our country, India. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Thank you.